From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. When I heard Eleni Gates was starting her own branding and marketing company, I wasn't surprised. Impressed, but not surprised. She was previously head of media and public relations for First Watch. Then she saw a gap in the marketplace for top-shelf brand storytellers, and she seized it. The Business Observer writes about entrepreneurs like Eleni every day online and every week in print. Go to businessobserverfl.com to subscribe. Hello, and welcome to the Business Observers from the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Eleni Gates, founder of Gates Hospitality Group. Eleni, thanks for being here and welcome.
Of course. I'm so excited to be chatting with you, Mark.
Yeah, so you and I have known each other, I think, like 10 or 12 years, and I feel like honored to have you on because I have seen you grow up as a professional through several parts of your career. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into leadership and your career and what Gates Hospitality Group really is all about. But before we do that, let's get our audience to know you a little bit more. And we're going to be talking about food or hospitality. So I'm going to start these 3 rapid fire questions with, what is the best meal that you cook or prepare?
Oh my goodness. I had a feeling you were going in this direction. So I pretty much stay out of the kitchen. My husband's a private chef, so he would tell you the best thing I make is reservations.
Yeah. So, but at least that's a good leadership lesson because you kind of know where you fit, right people in the right seats. So you're not trying to do something you're not.
Exactly. We both lean into our strengths, and our strengths are very different, so it works out.
Yes. Eleni, what is your hidden talent?
I don't know if this is a talent as much as an obsession, but I can sing the entirety of Hamilton, like the Broadway show, beginning to end. Not in tune, but I can get through it, yeah.
That is definitely a talent. Wow. All right. I'm guessing you have. Have you seen it live?
Yes. We actually, last Christmas, my parents got my husband and I tickets to go to New York and see it live on Broadway because it was his late father's favorite Broadway show. So it was important to him that we see the real deal. And since then, I can't stop listening to it.
Awesome. It is certainly catchy for sure. And maybe it's a Broadway singer, but last question, what job, if you weren't doing this, what is your dream job that you would be doing?
Not a Broadway singer. I think I would still lean into my love of writing and communications. I think I'd be a fiction author. So I'd write mysteries, thrillers, historical fiction. I love storytelling, and those are the genres that I really gravitate towards.
Awesome. Love it. All right, we're going to get into some leadership questions. And before that, I want to hear more about Gates Hospitality Group. One of the things when you put out, I think on social media, that you were starting this company that I was so impressed by was you're such a doer. Like, I remember watching you study for your public relations exam. And then, you left and you got left First Watch, which we're going to talk about in a second as well, and just got another job at another hospitality company. You're such a doer, entrepreneur person, which I admire in you. So tell us about Gates Hospitality Group. What is that? What's its mission?
Yes, I thank you for saying all those nice things about me. First of all, keep talking. Gates Hospitality Group is a firm that I started in September of 2025. And really, I just help growing consumer brands clarify their messaging, communicate intentionally with purpose, because we know that builds loyalty internally and externally. So it really is a business driver when you can communicate with intention. So that's the crux of it. And my career has been with growing restaurant concepts. That's where I've specialized. With Gates Hospitality Group, though, I've been hearing from a lot of other brands outside the industry too that are consumer-facing brands, from retail, bookstore to wealth management. So I'm getting to work with and learn from all sorts of different industries.
Because I think so many entities can can utilize someone who can help tell their story better, more efficiently, more consistently, right? I'm sure that's things you're hearing. Tell the brand story better.
Yes, and in a way that resonates with whoever your audience is, right? So my wealth management client is trying to target a certain type of individual that may be preparing to retire. And so how you communicate with that person is going to be vastly different than how an emerging beverage concept is communicating to their target audience. And it's all going to be different from how you're communicating to your internal audience. So I think what a lot of smaller emerging concepts may not yet have learned is we have to be so intentional with the way we communicate to our different audiences if we want the message to land and resonate. So that's what I help with.
Excellent. And we're going to go back in time a little bit. We're going to start in your younger years with First Watch. You talked about being with growing brands, right? I think First Watch is in something like 31 or 38 states now, or some ridiculously high number. It was not like that when you started. Tell us about your First Watch sort of career trajectory and how you grew there.
Absolutely. You're very right. So I'm going to go back a little bit further too. So when I was in college at University of Florida, go Gators, I was in the College of Journalism and Communications. So I was studying PR as my major, but in the College of Journalism, if you were to get any articles published in the student newspaper, which was the Independent Florida Alligator, you'd get extra credit in your courses. So being the anxious achiever that I am, of course, I had to do that. So I started writing some articles for the Alligator, and I loved it. So I joined the copy desk staff. I was a copy editor for a while up in Gainesville, and I decided I wanted to go into journalism, actually. So in applying for jobs, as I was finishing up college, I was reaching for the stars and beyond. I was applying to like New York Times staff writer roles, which, I wasn't quite ready for, apparently, and they told me that. So I moved home, and I actually ended up meeting Chris Tomasso, who at the time was the head of marketing for First Watch. And they didn't have an open position, but met him through my mom's friend. And I thought it would just be a meeting so he could critique my resume or maybe help me network as I was looking for this job after college. And that first meeting turned into we need PR help. When can you start? So I accidentally stumbled into this PR role at First Watch, and what a happy accident, because, that was an incredible training ground, I would say, for a successful career in hospitality.
Yeah. So tell us about Chris, who's Chris Tomasso, who's been a guest on From the Corner Office podcast, is really one of the greatest leaders I think you could work for or know, or just human beings. Tell us one or two things that stand out in your mind that you learned from Chris.
Oh, gosh. It's tough to narrow it down to one or two, but Chris does not settle for mediocrity. He has very high standards of excellence, and I think that is a big reason why First Watch has grown as successfully as it has today. But he's not afraid to challenge you and help you think differently, and he won't give you the answer. He will make you figure it out. And I learned a tremendous amount and gained a lot of confidence through that process of working with him throughout the years. So I think it's made me a better communicator. It's made me a better leader. It's made me a better business person. And, I wouldn't say all these nice things to his face, because we don't want to let it get it to his head. But
no, we don't. Although he's probably listening. But and a segue from Chris, one of the things that's so fascinating to me about your career at First Watch is you guys went from being privately held or owned by private equity firms, I should say, to going public. What was that experience like being, literally on the front lines of a company doing an IPO and Wall Street and all that things? What was that experience like for you?
Once in a lifetime. So I think back to an IPO in general is an incredible, often once in a lifetime experience for those who are fortunate enough to go through that. But the timing for when I worked with First Watch and did that was even more, I'll say unprecedented, because I think you know where I'm headed here. In February of 2020, I went to New York City with Chris Tomasso, a couple other leaders, Matt Eisenacher from First Watch, to tour both different stock exchanges. So we went to the New York Stock Exchange, we went to NASDAQ, and we met with our investor relations firm that we had on retainer back then. And we were trying to figure out which exchange to list on and all the logistics to go through there. So that was February 2020 with plans to list a month or two after that. And then we all know what was happening even behind the scenes in New York in February 2020, before everyone knew that COVID had ravaged the city. And then, of course, March of 2020, the world came to a halt. So we obviously put the IPO on the back burner until October of 21 is when we ended up listing. But that experience was brand new to me. I'd never worked in finance. I'd never worked in investor relations. I'd never worked for a public company. But I had mentors that believed in me, mentors that had seen me figure things out. I'm very determined. My family would say stubborn.
Yeah. Right. Stubborn is the other word you can use.
That's right. And I'm okay with it. Then we went public, and all of a sudden I found myself working in investor relations. And it was incredibly exciting because I love to learn new things. I never want to be doing the same thing over and over again. But it was also scary because I was not confident in my ability to read a P&L or, talk to these institutional investors. I had quite a bit of imposter syndrome at that point. So the learner and the curious person that I am, I decided I'm going to go get my MBA so I can really understand, really, in my mind, earn my seat at this table. And I did that. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm so impressed by your ability to just decide I'm going to learn this, because you're right. Like, dealing investor relations, it's a lot more high pressure. It's Wall Street. It's not, if I'm to say, it's not a nice reporter from a little publication in Sarasota saying, I want to write about your new openings in Florida for the fourth quarter. The expectations were a lot different in that role.
Yeah, they absolutely were. The stakes are high. And some folks around me believed in me before I believed in me. And I think I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by people like that throughout my career, and have chosen to surround myself by people like that.
Sure. I want to get back to imposter syndrome. It's a question that comes up a decent amount on this podcast. How have you, maybe that's one of the ways is forcing yourself to learn things, but how in general in your career, Eleni, have you dealt with imposter syndrome when it comes up?
Yes. So earlier in my career, I felt it quite a bit. And the way I've been able to do that, you mentioned watching me study for my accreditation in public relations. Part of that was because I didn't feel like I had earned my seat at the table. I didn't feel like I knew everything there was to know to support the brand or now my clients. And instead of, faking it till I make it, I said, I'm going to go study every night and weekend for a year and earn this. And that's how I've given myself the confidence. Same exact thing with the MBA. I could have figured it out. I could have faked it. I could have saved a lot of my own money and some of the government's money if I would have, just figured it out. But in order for me to truly feel confident in what I'm bringing to the table, it's just learning and further educating myself. And that has worked for me in a great way.
Yeah. And then I want to go back to mentors and First Watch. We talked about Chris Tomasso and his influence and impact on you. The late Ken Pendery, co-founder of First Watch, somebody I admire greatly. I know you did as well. Tell us what you learned from Ken, from working with him and alongside him.
Humility is, I think, one word to sum it up. Ken was never above anyone. He was in the restaurants. If the dishwasher called out, as CEO, Ken would hop back there and be working the dish machine. Like, he was walking the shop room floor And he knew that the most important people in the organization were the ones working in the restaurants and creating the experience. So when I actually first started at First Watch, my first week in the office, Chris Tomasso, who was my boss at the time, was out of town. So, we had chatted. I knew what I needed to work on, watch the orientation videos, all that fun stuff that come with a new role. And I couldn't figure out how to get the sound on my computer to work. So I'm underneath my desk, tangled in wires. My boss isn't here. I'm just, overwhelmed and a little anxious. And some guy walks by and says, what's going on? Can I help you? And so I said, I just can't get these speakers to work. He crawled under my desk and we played around with the wires and we made it work. And then he gets back up and he goes, I'm Ken, by the way. And silly me for not Googling his picture, because I could have done that in 2014. Didn't know what he looked like. And I just froze because what do you mean? I just let the CEO crawl under my desk to help me with my IT issue. So that was my first interaction with Ken. And it just captures how he approached everything. He was never above. He was never too good. Yeah. And another story that I will never forget, back in 2018, I was going through a really difficult time personally. And Ken found out through Chris or whoever, invited me to lunch, sat across the table from me and said, are you okay? Do you need a place to stay? Do you need financial help? What can Jenny and I do? Like, can we cook for you? You want to come over for dinner? Just opening his heart and door and being a human instead of being the boss. And that is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And you have to think that, I mean, right? Ken did that for everybody, right? It was
everybody.
Nature. Yeah.
Yes.
So moving on to some amazing, I'm just still thinking about how awesome he was and gone too soon for sure. Tell us about leadership, in general, Eleni, what is good leadership to you? We talked about your mentors and influencers or some of them. So what does good leadership mean to you?
In a few words, I believe leadership is motivating and encouraging people to be the best they can be. And that can be, by setting an example and acting or treating people the way that you would want to be treated, right? The golden rule, we go back to preschool with that one. And not necessarily expecting anything in return. I had nothing to give Ken, but he and Jenny would go out of their way to make sure that I was safe and comfortable and okay. And doesn't even need to be, leading people who report to you. It could be your community. It could be joining a mentorship program. I'm part of the Gleam network, which, I get to mentor emerging women in restaurant leadership and help them through some of the most rewarding and challenging parts of their career. And I get, so much fulfillment out of that. So it's helping people be the best version of themselves versus being a boss is very different than being a leader in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. What's a piece of leadership advice that you've received that resonates with you?
So many. Man, I've been surrounded by some brilliant people throughout my career, both at First Watch and some incredible people at Firebirds. My parents, who own a restaurant on Siesta Key, I learned a ton from them. Jason Brooks has become a friend of mine. He is an operations leader down in Florida. He was with Artistry as COO for a while. He said on a panel at a conference last year, a restaurant conference, culture is the worst behavior you're willing to allow. So your culture as an organization is only as strong as your worst team member, your rudest, most toxic team member. That's your culture. It's not the one person who's incredible. They don't define your culture. That lower person does.
I mean, that's great advice. And I got another leadership question. We're going to segue back though. Tell us about your parents. And before I finish that question, It was such a great day for me, a great experience when I randomly went in for breakfast at your parents' restaurant and figured out that that was your dad and went up that I know you. And he was just beaming. Like, I'm this rando stranger, just, and he's like, I was like, I think your daughter's amazing. He's like, I do too. So, um, it was so wonderful as a father. It was so wonderful to see his reaction to when some stranger said, "I know your daughter." So, with that preamble, tell us about what you've learned from leadership and life from your parents.
Oh gosh, this could be a whole other podcast episode in itself,
Yes.
Mark. My dad is definitely my biggest fan. I love that you had that interaction with him. My parents, to this day, they're in their 60s. I'll share. I think they'd be okay with me sharing that. They are 7 days a week at their restaurant. They're open 7:30 to 2 p.m., so breakfast and lunch. But this mom and pop restaurant on Siesta Key, it's called the Village Cafe. Since I was 5 years old when they took over the restaurant, we would drive into work with mom and dad before 7 a.m. so they could brew the coffee, get the bacon going, open the restaurant. We'd eat breakfast, which is amazing because, thick Texas toast with extra butter, and I'd have my over medium eggs and the yolk. I'm 7 years old at this point. I would literally have yolk dripping down my chin and like staining my clothes before I even went to school. And then we'd catch the bus from the restaurant to go to school in the morning. And that was just how it was. We weren't, oh, we have to wake up early to do this, or, I want to sleep in and I don't want to eat breakfast at the restaurant. It was, this is what we do. This is a family business. We have to work hard so we can then enjoy life and do the things we want to do and buy the things we want to buy. And from, for the past 30 years, 7 days a week, they have been in that restaurant and with a mindset of hospitality and servant leadership. They serve not only, bacon and eggs to customers, but the community. They're helping people. They're building relationships. They give back more than any local business owner I know in Sarasota. And I grew up with that as an example. So a ton of who I am as a person is because of growing up in the cafe and because of the parents that I was fortunate to have.
Amazing. And you're one of there's 3 daughters, right? Do I remember that?
Yes, I'm the middle child.
Yes, we're both middle children. Middle. Long live the middle child, overlooked and underappreciated.
That's right.
Right. Going back to leadership. This is a question again we've been asking a lot on From the Corner Office, and I think it's really part of what your business is. How important is storytelling, good storytelling, to leadership in your view?
Storytelling is everything. People relate to people and experiences. They don't relate to products or eggs, to use as an example from my parents' place. Right. So in leadership, when you're coaching or when you're delegating, it's not, hey, Mark, go do this. It's, hey, Mark, I would love if you could do this. And by doing it, you're helping the company reach this outcome and you're helping us achieve this. And here's the bigger picture and how you're part of it. And that is how, you build that relationship and drive team loyalty, but how you get buy-in and how you get people to feel like they're really part of something. Because we know, and that especially the younger generations that are now in the workplace, they want to feel like they're part of something bigger. They don't just want to be told what to do and when to do it. Like, why am I doing this? So if you can tell the story and the why behind it, it works wonders.
Excellent. Well, Eleni, as we're coming up to the end of 2025, what can we look forward to for Gates Hospitality Group? What's top of mind and what are you excited about going into next year?
I am jumping out of bed every morning, Mark. This is now, and hopefully I'll still feel that way into next year, but I'm grateful to have the experience and have earned the experience and the education to have the confidence to open this. I am working with incredible clients who are growing and who are motivated. I'm learning every day, not only from those clients, but you know how quickly our world is evolving with things like AI and, digital space. So Gates Hospitality Group is something new and exciting every day. I'm working on projects with, yes, restaurants who have been my bread and butter forever, pun intended, and other consumer-facing brands that are really trying to level up. And it's so cool to be a part of that.
Awesome. Well, we are rooting for you here at From the Corner Office podcast. Eleni Gates, Gates Hospitality Group, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordy. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.